Andrew Weissman's stark declaration, "This is the end of the rule of law in this country," came as both a warning and a judgment on the state of the American justice system, particularly in the face of former President Donald Trump's ongoing legal battles. Weissmann, a veteran prosecutor who once served as one of special counsel Robert Mueller's top deputies, is no stranger to the complexities of holding powerful figures accountable under the law. His recent statement was made in direct response to mounting developments in Trump's legal cases, where the Department of Justice (DOJ), state prosecutors, and the courts have become deeply entangled in political turbulence. Trump currently faces multiple indictments, including federal charges over his handling of classified documents, obstruction of justice allegations, and cases tied to election interference both at the federal level and in the state of Georgia. Despite the weight of these charges, Weissmann points to a troubling reality. Instead of these prosecutions being seen as straightforward applications of justice, they have become battlegrounds for partisan conflict, with courts facing immense pressure to delay proceedings and political leaders, both allies and opponents of Trump, using every development as ammunition in a broader war over the nation's democratic institutions. For Weissmann, the erosion is not abstract. It is visible in how the judiciary hesitates under political fire, how prosecutors and their families are threatened, and how millions of Americans view court decisions not as impartial rulings but as political theater. His statement, therefore, is less about a single trial and more about the cumulative effect of years of hesitation, intimidation, and manipulation, which have brought the United States to a moment where the very principle that no one is above the law appears to be collapsing. At the center of Weissmann's warning is the Department of Justice itself, which he suggests has been caught in an impossible bind. On one hand, the DOJ under Attorney General Merrick Garland has sought to appear apolitical, avoiding any step that could be seen as targeting Trump unfairly. On the other hand, this cautious approach has often translated into delays and missed opportunities that critics argue allow Trump to manipulate the system. The appointment of special counsel Jack Smith was meant to insulate the DOJ from accusations of partisanship, but even Smith's indictments, unprecedented in their scope against a former president, have become flashpoints of political division rather than affirmations of impartial justice. Weissmann points out that Trump's legal strategy of delay has been remarkably successful, with key trials now pushed beyond the upcoming election cycle, raising the possibility that Trump could return to office before facing a jury. Such an outcome, Weissmann argues, would not just test the DOJ's independence, it would render the entire system powerless, since a re-elected Trump could pardon allies, derail ongoing cases, or even fire officials tasked with prosecuting him. Equally troubling is the climate of intimidation surrounding these cases. Judges have been vilified by Trump's public statements, prosecutors branded as enemies of the people, and jurors warned that they will face exposure if they convict. For Weissmann, this environment demonstrates how fragile the rule of law becomes when political actors treat legal accountability as optional and weaponize their public influence to undermine proceedings. His assessment reflects frustration with a DOJ that, despite its formal independence, appears unable to deliver swift accountability in the face of Trump's relentless counterattacks, leaving the impression that the most powerful individual in the nation can bend the legal system to his advantage simply by threatening chaos if held accountable. Weissmann's statement is also rooted in the broader political consequences of these legal battles, which have further polarized an already fractured nation. He notes that a significant portion of the public, particularly Trump's supporters, now views the justice system itself as illegitimate, framing every indictment as evidence of a political witch hunt. This perception has been actively fueled by Trump's rhetoric, in which prosecutors are cast as corrupt, the DOJ as weaponized, and judges as partisan actors. On the other side of the divide, many Americans fear that if Trump is not held accountable, it will confirm the belief that the rich and powerful live under a different set of rules, thereby corroding faith in democracy itself. Weissmann's alarm is that both sides, though they disagree on what justice looks like, share a common distrust of the system, a dangerous situation for a country that depends on legal institutions being seen as neutral arbiters. The erosion of confidence is compounded by Congress, where Republican leaders increasingly echo Trump's narrative and use their positions to threaten DOJ funding or investigations into prosecutors, further politicizing what should be independent processes. Weissmann argues that this atmosphere means the stakes extend beyond Trump himself. It is now about whether the American people can still trust that justice is applied equally. The concern is not that one man might escape accountability, but that the system itself, once bent, may never fully recover. His declaration, "The end of the rule of law," is therefore not hyperbole but a warning that the DOJ's cautiousness, Trump's aggressive defiance, and the public's growing cynicism have combined to bring the United States to a tipping point. If Trump succeeds in avoiding meaningful legal consequences, Weissmann warns, the precedent will be set that future leaders can operate outside the bounds of the law, undermining democracy in ways that may be irreversible. Weissmann's warning has also drawn attention to the Supreme Court's role in shaping the outcome of Trump's cases, particularly decisions that have slowed or limited accountability. Recent rulings on presidential immunity, for instance, have given Trump and his legal team fresh arguments to delay trials and weaken the charges brought against him. Weissmann has been openly critical of how the courts, including the highest in the land, appear increasingly responsive to political calculations rather than the urgent need for justice. He argues that such rulings not only embolden Trump but also send a message to future presidents that the legal consequences of their actions can be negotiated away or endlessly postponed. This judicial caution, in Weissmann's view, reinforces the perception that the system bends when faced with extraordinary power, undermining the very idea of equal justice. While courts insist they are applying the law neutrally, the effect of their decisions has been to buy Trump time, possibly enough to reclaim the presidency before any verdict is delivered. For Weissmann, this is a critical point. The rule of law does not collapse all at once, it dies slowly, through decisions that seem procedural but carry profound political consequences. The courts, by prioritizing caution and delay over swift accountability, risk being remembered not for upholding the Constitution but for enabling its erosion. Another element of Weissmann's concern lies in how Trump has transformed his legal jeopardy into a political weapon, effectively turning indictments into campaign talking points. At rallies and in interviews, Trump frames every charge as proof that the establishment fears him, casting prosecutors and the DOJ as extensions of a corrupt elite. This narrative not only rallies his base but also pressures Republican lawmakers to defend him at all costs, for fear of alienating his supporters. Weissmann highlights this feedback loop as especially dangerous. The legal system attempts to enforce accountability, Trump reframes it as persecution, and his allies amplify that message until millions believe it. The DOJ, in turn, becomes hesitant to act too forcefully, worried that any move will be seen as political. In Weissmann's analysis, this cycle is evidence of how political power can overwhelm legal norms, converting the justice system into a stage for partisan battles rather than a neutral arbiter of truth. The irony, he suggests, is that the very act of prosecuting Trump, intended to demonstrate that no one is above the law, may end up reinforcing the opposite perception if the system fails to deliver decisive outcomes. In this environment, Weissmann's phrase, "end of the rule of law," becomes not just a warning but a description of a country where accountability itself is now defined by political allegiance rather than legal principle. Weissmann's statement has therefore resonated far beyond legal circles, sparking debates among politicians, journalists, and ordinary citizens about whether the United States is entering a post-rule of law era. Supporters of his view argue that the signs are undeniable: a former president openly defying legal authority, courts bending under pressure, prosecutors vilified, and a public so polarized that no verdict will be universally accepted as legitimate. Critics, however, insist that Weissmann is overstating the case, pointing out that Trump has, in fact, been indicted multiple times, an unprecedented show of legal accountability in itself. But Weissmann counters that indictments mean little without timely trials and consequences, and he worries that delays, intimidation, and political obstruction will ultimately render those charges symbolic rather than substantive. The debate over his statement underscores the fragile state of American democracy, where trust in institutions is rapidly eroding. Weissmann's central fear is not simply that Trump may escape justice, but that the precedent this creates will linger long after him. If political power can shield a leader from accountability, then future presidents, Republican or Democrat, may feel emboldened to test those boundaries further. In that sense, Weissmann's words serve not just as commentary on Trump's current cases, but as a warning about the trajectory of the entire American political and legal system. Unless the DOJ and courts demonstrate that justice applies equally to all, Weissmann suggests, the damage to public faith may be irreversible.